Okay guys, so for today's lesson, or for today's reading lesson and reading story, we don't actually have any new vocabulary like we normally do on Thursdays. However, I do want you to get out your vocabulary notebook, and you're just going to add this at the bottom of what we already have. So underneath number 10, go ahead and add number 11, which is the word protagonist. Because we're going to be talking about protagonists today. And we will put that definition down in just a little bit. Or no, actually we can look at what a protagonist is on the bookmark on page 530. So you should have your vocabulary notebook out. You're adding number 11, protagonist. And you should have your textbook out, your reading textbook out and open to page 530. And on that bookmark next to the title, it says that a protagonist is the main character of a story. So, a protagonist, we're going to add the definition, the main character of a story. It says in a myth, which is what we're going to be reading today, the protagonist is usually a god or goddess or a heroic character. So, that's the word I want you to add, because the other word we're going to be talking about, we actually already have in our notebooks from much, much earlier. And it is the word hyperbole, which we know is a form of figurative language that uses exaggeration to create emphasis or a sense of drama. So as we read this story, we are going to figure out the protagonist, and then we are going to come across a lot of hyperbole. Remember, hyperbole is exaggeration. Then after you're done with this story, you will have some independent practice where you will have to figure out who the protagonist or the main character is, and then you'll have to find some examples of hyperbole, and then you'll create your own hyperbole. So let's go ahead and on page 530, let's start with the genre. So make sure you're reading in your head as I read out loud. Myths are stories that help people make sense of the world. They may explain natural occurrences, such as the sunrise, with stories of gods or goddesses. So myths are fiction. They are not true. They are made up stories. However, back a really, really long time ago, like in ancient times, myths, they didn't have the science and the technology that we have now, so people came up with these myths to explain certain things. But they are not true. They are made up stories that were used in ancient times to explain why things happened the way they did. So let's go ahead and read, and we will, or read in your head, read along with me while I read out loud. Poseidon and the Kingdom of Atlantis, retold by Gillian Reed. Now I want you to pay attention to that word, retold by. It doesn't say written by or by, it says retold by. That's because myths, like I said, are stories from ancient times, and this person, Gillian Reed, is just retelling the story. They're writing it in their own words, but they did not come up with the original idea. At the beginning of time, the immortal Greek gods of Mount Olympus divided the world among themselves. Zeus, the king of the gods, ruled over the sky and the thunderbolt. Poseidon, his brother, was the god of the sea, the lake, and the earthquake. Poseidon's power and bad temper earned him the name Earthshaker. He could stir up the oceans with his trident, a three-pronged fishing spear. He could also calm the sea, riding over the waves in his golden chariot. So, we can already tell that this probably isn't true, because we can tell that the people who originally came up with this were trying to explain lightning and thunder and earthquakes, why the ocean has waves and all of that, which we know nowadays is for many different reasons, for many different scientific reasons. But these are the types of stories they came up with to explain it back before they were able to do it the way we can now. And we see in this little box down at the bottom, this orange box, it says, in this paragraph we learn about Poseidon. we see that he will be the protagonist of this story. We know that because the paragraph did also mention Zeus, but like I just said, they just mentioned him, whereas they talked about Poseidon and went into detail. His name is also in the title. So both of those things, the title plus the amount of detail we learn about Poseidon in the very beginning, tells us that Poseidon will be the protagonist or main character of this story. So let's keep reading. Along with the seas, Poseidon ruled over an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called Atlantis. The people of the island grew wheat, fruit, and vegetables in its fertile soil. Gold and other metals lay beneath the soil. Herds of magnificent elephants and other animals lived in the forests. Poseidon created hot and cold springs, so the people always had fresh water to drink and warm water in which to bathe. So this place that we're talking about sounds pretty amazing, like paradise. So I wonder what's going to happen. Let's keep reading. On the island of Atlantis lived a beautiful woman named Cleito. Poseidon was so taken by Cleito's beauty that he married this mortal woman. Remember, a mortal is a person who is just a normal person. They're able to die, whereas the gods were immortal, which meant they couldn't die. He built a palace for Cleito on a graceful hill in the middle of the island. To protect Cleito, Poseidon surrounded the hill with circular belts of water and land. A canal from the ocean to the hill cut across these belts. Cleito and Poseidon became the parents of 5 sets of twins, all of them boys. The boys grew up to rule over their father's territory, with the oldest, Atlas, ruling as king. So 5 sets of twins. That means they had 10 kids, 10 sons. Let's keep going. Okay, so on page 532, Atlantis was the greatest island kingdom ever known. That sentence right there is an example of hyperbole. That is, it's talking about the greatest island kingdom ever known. Well, was it actually the greatest? Probably not. But we're using exaggeration to make it seem so much more than just an island in the middle of the ocean. The power of its rulers extended beyond the island to Europe and Africa. For many generations, Atlantis was a rich and happy land. The walls of the city were lined with brass and tin. Gold covered the temple of Poseidon. That's another hyperbole, that gold covered it. Well, they're not saying that gold literally, there was just a sheet of gold that just covered it. They're using that to say that there was gold all over it. It wasn't completely made of gold, it wasn't covered like a big sheet, but it was all over the place. So that's another example of hyperbole that helps you to see how much gold there, or helps you to imagine how much gold there was. The people of Atlantis were noble and virtuous and lived by a set of laws that Poseidon had created. But over time, the kings and the people became petty and greedy. They ignored Poseidon's laws and began to war against other nations. So let's think about what Atlantis was like when people followed Poseidon's laws. Well, it was covered in gold. There was all kinds of animals, all kinds of food. It was good. Everybody that lived there was rich and happy and had a lot of power over other people, which when they followed Poseidon's laws, they didn't take it too far and get too power hungry, we call it. But then it changed when people started to ignore the laws. The people became petty and greedy, which meant it probably wasn't a very nice place to live, because petty and greedy is the opposite of kindness and sharing. Let's keep reading. I bet something bad's going to happen based on what we've read so far, but let's keep reading to find out. Zeus saw what was happening to this great race of people and was angry. He called the gods to Mount Olympus, pointing his finger at Poseidon. He blamed him for allowing Atlantis to become spoiled. Using his powers, Poseidon took his trident and furiously whipped up the seas. A gigantic wave washed over the kingdom of Atlantis and flooded the island. Atlantis instantly sank into the sea. So this orange box right underneath says, saying that Atlantis instantly sank into the sea is an exaggeration. And it's an example of hyperbole, because if a whole island and city is going to sink into the sea, it's not going to happen instantly. Instantly is like with a snap of the fingers. It may happen quickly, but it's probably going to take several minutes, probably several hours. But they are using hyperbole to say that's how fast it was. It was really, really fast, much faster than you think. Not actually literally like that, but really, really fast. So this story, we learn a myth is not real. It's made up to describe, it's made up to explain certain things. So in this last paragraph, we see what this story was written about to explain. It was there was a huge wave that washed onto the kingdom of Atlantis and flooded the island, which we now know is a tsunami. Tsunamis are natural occurrences that where a giant wave, a massive, massive wave, comes and it washes over a land and causes lots of flooding. We also see where it says that he furiously whipped up the seas. Well, tsunamis are most likely caused by earthquakes in the sea. So this story was written to explain why tsunamis and earthquakes happen. Let's look at this orange box on page 533. It says, there are some who believe that the great island kingdom of Atlantis really existed. The Greek philosopher Plato described such a place in his writing. Many people have searched for the sunken island, but no one has ever found it. So Atlantis is most likely a myth. It most likely never existed. However, there are many people who think it has, and they are looking for it. Nobody's found it yet. That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist, but it's a good indication that this story is probably completely made up and not real. Okay, so now let's see, we're done with the story. So go ahead and get out today's packet for Thursday. Open to, well, the only page other than what it says, and this is your homework, or your independent practice, I'm sorry. So what you need to do is you need to read the box at the top to make sure you understand what you're going to be looking for. Then you're going to read this short passage, and then you're going to answer these questions about the passage. I think number 4 is not actually about a passage, but you will be using the figurative language we talked about today, hyperbole, to describe the coral reef, which is what we've been reading about all week. Okay, so that's it for reading today. I think that's it. Go ahead and work on the independent practice. If you have any questions about today's lesson, or you just want to chat about it, I know there's a lot of you that really are very, very interested in the Greek gods and goddesses. So if you just want to chat about that, reach out to me later on today between 1 and 5.